Hello, it is Thursday night. It's 7 o'clock. That can only mean one thing. It is the Football 365 show. It's big weekend here on the Football 365 show, brought to you by Paddy Power. I'm your host, Mark Smith. As you can see there on our top quality graphics package that we paid £0 for. Mark Smith -host. That's me. I'm here every time. And I'm also here every time with Sarah Winterburn, who wasn't here last time, actually, so that's not completely true. Sarah Winterburn is editor-in-chief of football365.com. She'll be here with me talking about everything, talking about the Glazer protests, talking about the Champions League, talking about all the games coming up this weekend. It's going to be a good one, going to be a packed show. We'll be out of your hair by the time the Europa League semi-finals kick off at 8 o'clock. So all that's left to say is this is Big Weekend, brought to you by Paddy Power. Right, here we are. Me, Sarah Winterburn, you guys. Sarah, how are you?
I'm not bad. I'm in my bedroom today. You've got me live from my bedroom. This is new. Yeah, I charge a fortune for a live stream from my bedroom generally. So
we're normally in your kitchen and it's so bright that I can't see anything. But here we are, behind the scenes, a peek behind the curtain. There is so much to talk about this week. It feels like, is this the case whenever we're sort of a month out from the end of the season? It feels like there's just drama, there's storylines, there's narratives all over the place. What have you made of the last week in football? Let's start with Champions League, because it's been a superb week for the Premier League in Europe, hasn't it?
It has. It's funny how you're saying about lots of things happening. When it comes to the Premier League, there seems to be very little happening. And yet, this week again has been fantastic. You know, it started with the protests at the weekend. We've gone seamlessly into the Champions League. Two great performances, slightly contrasting performances, but two really good performances. That Man City game on Tuesday night was fascinating in that they played like everyone's been trying to play against Man City themselves for the last 3 or 4 years. And they did it so well. They kept their shape incredibly well. They were incredibly disciplined. They were not afraid to go very quick, on the counter-attack, play vertically, as people like to say these days. You know, that ball out from Edison, which entirely took out that PSG defence and found Zinchenko. We're not used to seeing this from a City side. We're not used to seeing City except not being in the ascendance and except not having the possession. And sort of handing that initiative to PSG, knowing full well that PSG had to score goals, so they were pushed up, and City really took advantage of that gap behind. You know, Kevin De Bruyne had a great game. Phil Foden was particularly good. Riyad Mahrez, again, massively underrated. What a phenomenal season he's had. Gets a bit lost in all of it, doesn't it? But the defence was extraordinary. I thought. Really,
let's talk about Mahrez for a bit more though, Sarah, because I feel like he never really gets the credit he deserves. You know, we talk about with players for big teams. We talk about killers, those guys that just are ice cold in front of goal, that step up in the big games, that get the job done. Man City have got a fair few of them, but no more so, even Aguero I'm including, no more so than Riyad Mahrez. He always steps up when it matters, and I never feel like he's got one of those glaring misses in him. You know, the first goal against PSG, okay, look, it looks quite simple, right? It's rolled across the 6-yard box, and he puts it high up where the keeper can't reach it. But there are players in that Man City side, naming no names, Raheem Sterling, who might miss that 1 in every 20 goes. I never feel like Mahrez is going to miss that.
More than 1 in every 20. That wasn't a 19 in every 20 chance. That was a 50-50, really. With the way it came to him, the defender's coming at him. He's not got a massive amount of time. And yet, like you say, he absolutely trusted him to put it away. And he did. And he has had a great... you almost feel like he'll spend 7-8 years at Man City and be excellent in all those 7 or 8 seasons, and yet still leave sort of with everybody never quite loving him. And I don't quite know what that is, whether it's because he's quiet, he doesn't really attract attention. He isn't one for big boot deals, or you kind of don't see him, do you? You don't see him outside
gets on
the
with
football pitch. Yeah, and so maybe he's not. And we have had this thing over the last 5 or 6 years anyway, where Man City players are not appreciated outside of Man City fans. They're just not. You know. Sergio Aguero, whether it's Sergio Aguero, David Silva, whoever, they never attain those heights that if they played for Man United, they would be legends, undoubtedly.
Why is that then? Is it just because the size of the club isn't quite there yet? The prestige isn't there?
It doesn't have the fan base in the same way, quite understandably. You know, I've done this job a long time. I know how this works. It takes a while because it takes the foreign foreign fans to take on a club. It usually only happens about 10 years after a team hits its peak that you see that explosion around the world. We saw it with Chelsea. They were when they first came through, when Abramovich first took over, very little interest and very, very few fans anywhere but in West London. Within 10 years, you get these pockets of fans in Africa and India, and Man City will get there.
Yeah.
There will be kids in Malaysia or kids in Kenya who are wearing Man City shirts now. So we'll see that coming through. But at the moment, they're not quite big enough, and there's that resentment a little bit, isn't there, from elsewhere in the Premier League fans, that they don't quite, they don't want to respect Man City because of where the money's come from, etc. And this sort of idea that they're Johnny come lately.
That's a valid argument, though, isn't it?
I don't think it's a valid argument about those players. It frustrates me a little bit.
Not the players. Definitely not the players.
It frustrates me a little bit because the reaction to Tuesday night is very much, we saw it in the mailboxes. They're like, oh well, they've got money. It doesn't really mean anything. If you're not watching Phil Foden and thinking, wow, and enjoying that, I honestly feel sorry for you, because if you can't separate that a little bit and just say, it's nothing to do with Phil Foden. He's a boy from Stockport. He's doing exactly what he always wanted to do, is play for Man City. The money's got nothing to do with him. He would have played for Man City if they were 18th in the Premier League or in League One. This was his dream. But if you can not watch that and think, do you know what? I can. Maybe it's because I don't support a Premier League team. I can separate that and not see, because I don't. Obviously, they're not rivals to me. They're not rivals to Huddersfield Town. No. So, I can enjoy that. And as a defender, I absolutely love watching Ruben Diaz. I think he's phenomenal. He's had an extraordinary season. He's ludicrously good. He's 23, which in centre half terms is like a teenager.
He's a baby.
He could play at this level for another 10, 12 years, and he could get better in that time as well. And he's undoubtedly been the signing of the season. And to me, he's probably the Premier League player of the season. He won't get that from the PFA. No. For the players, that'll go to Bruno Fernandes, which would be particularly amusing if Man United end the season with nothing. But, the City players will be split. The votes will be split between them. But I can imagine Ruben Diaz getting the Football Writers Award because they tend to be a little bit more, don't think too much about, playing for Man United. Players. He will. He has been a phenomenal signing. And like I wrote the other night, I don't get the impression he was Man City's first choice. And there was a little bit of an underwhelmingness about when he was signed, because sort of City were expected to buy one of the best central defenders in the world, or someone who's perceived to be that, a Koulibaly or a Upamecano, or someone that was like a name. And there was a bit of a, they've paid 60 million quid for who? What? Because most of us don't watch Portuguese football. He hadn't even played in the Champions League. It's kind of, and yet he's been the difference between that City side looking vulnerable and flawed, as we saw last season at the very start of this season. Remember, he came in on the back of that thwacking by Leicester, in which they looked utterly exposed, and everyone was talking about, can Pep Guardiola last the season? He comes in, that whole defence, and what he's done with John Stones is, nobody could have written this. John Stones looked like he was out on his arse, didn't he? There was no, it was a surprise that he was even still at the club at the end of last summer, because he'd fallen so far out of favour. Didn't start the season, probably started the season as fourth choice centre back. Now he looks as good as he's ever looked, and that's about having the partnership, and that's
that's it.
And Diaz, even though he's the younger one, he looks like the more senior, and that's quite a trick to pull off. And I love watching City. I think I think it's possible. It certainly is possible for me to think, I don't like the way where the money's come from. I don't like the idea behind it and why City have been bought, but this is still probably the best coach of the last 20 years. If you just look at what's happening on the pitch. And it's a nonsense to say it's all about money, because other managers could come in and not do what he's done. And there's no way 9 out of 10 managers couldn't come in and do what he's done. He's phenomenal. What they've managed to do is get the recruitment right from top down at the club. It's not just the manager, it's not just the players, it's everyone in all those positions. It's the director of football, it's everyone who's in scouting in those departments. The unseen members of that club have done an unbelievable job. It's joined up thinking, and you'd be surprised how few clubs sort of indulge themselves in joined up thinking.
And look how many clubs have had billions and have done nothing with it.
Absolutely.
It happens all the time.
Money is obviously a factor. It has to be. We can't ignore that. We're not going to pretend that's an big blue elephant in the room. But you have to be pretty special to turn it into the kind of performances that they've put in over the last 4 years.
Definitely.
To win, they're about to win their third in 4 years. That hasn't been done since Man United did it under Alex Ferguson, and it's really difficult to pull off that kind of domination. I know they had a season where they weren't quite up to it, but that was that centre half problem. They fixed it, and they've moved on, and they're already the team to beat next season and the season after that. You already think, how is every team going to reach them? That's the sort of level they've put.
You're ruining my enthusiasm here. For everyone watching at home, whether it be on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, you can get in touch with the show. We've had someone do that. Philip Ennis has got in touch, talking about your point about Man City globally there, Sarah. Philip Ennis says, in Cambodia, Man City images everywhere, particularly on their national beer, Cambodia beer. Little plug there for Cambodia beer. I mean, wherever you go now, you see those shirts. You see Chelsea. It's
that's what's going to happen. As sort of so-called legacy fans, everyone's sort of like is a little bit sniffy about that. But so much of football is about globalization, just as any other business, and it's massively important that City reach those markets. To City, it might not be important to me or you, but it's massively important to City, and they're obviously doing that job.
It's why those comments from Ed Woodward a few years ago, where he said that United don't have to compete to still be globally relevant. Well, actually, Ed Woodward, you're going to get usurped by these teams that are competing, because the new generation, like all generations of kids of a certain age, they like to be associated with success and support a team and have that deflected glory. So I completely understand that. So you can't be finishing top 4, top 5 every year when you've got a team like Man City or a team like Liverpool dominating, particularly a team like Liverpool, who already have that history and are now creating new history. So very short-sighted, I thought.
If you're 7 or 8 right now, you don't choose Man United, I think, unless you've got a familial thing going on. If you're picking, as most kids did at that age, unless you've got that local affiliation, if you pick the best, I remember being 7 and picking the best team, the team at the top of the Premiership, and that was, unfortunately for me, that was Tottenham in those, 1981. They were the best team, so I've always retained a soft spot for Spurs because of that reason. But had Man City been top, they would have been City, and obviously they'd stayed there. And that's how you get, 7-year-olds want 8-year-olds. They want success. They want, they're not going to pick Man United because of their history. Or because their stadium's called the Theatre of Dreams. You need to sell success, don't you? Success sells, sex sells, not this kind of, kids don't want to learn about history.
No, well, we've given Man City enough attention here. We don't want them to have too many fans in the future. Let's talk instead about England's other representative that were fantastic in Europe this week. It was last night. It was Chelsea, Madrid. Chelsea, talk to me about them, because I was so impressed by them in both legs, actually.
Yeah, they were so good last week, and I had a niggling thought that they weren't quite going to score the goals, because you just thought they have so many chances and they can't quite put it. And you kind of, until that second goal, even though it didn't feel close, really on the pitch, until that second goal goes in, you didn't know, did you? You just thought it would be, the narrative would be so easy to write that Real Madrid to have one chance and score one goal in that second half.
It was obviously going to happen. Obviously, Benzema was going to score 93rd minute.
Yeah, that's what it felt like, didn't it?
Yeah.
But Chelsea kept them at bay so well. I mean, this Chelsea side, it's pragmatic in some ways, because they are very organised, very disciplined, get men behind the ball. Again, we could talk about that so-called sort of vertical style of football where you go quick. When you go quick. And you're not looking to dominate the ball. And I think there maybe is a little bit of a shift going on. We've had that kind of obsession with keeping the ball, and now we see with Antonio Conte doing so well at Inter. You see that success of sort of, actually, we don't need to dominate games. If you've got that pace up front, and if you've got a finisher. Now Chelsea are just lacking a finisher. I mean, we all watched that game and thought, if they buy a proper striker in the summer, a 25 goal season, man, they are going to contend for the title, no doubt about it, because they've got a manager who's up to that task now. And Roman Abramovich will watch that game, and and regardless of what happens against Man City in the Champions League final, he'll have watched that game and thought, this is why I invested in Chelsea, because we can compete. Chelsea. why he invented Chelsea.
Big shout.
Just
Exclusive here on the Football 365 show. Do you think this is the worst possible PR for Frank Lampard, what's happening now?
It's awful. I mean, I can't feel slightly sorry for him because he left Chelsea with quite a lot of the media saying, "Oh God, that we keep saying, they shot Bambi." That was Henry Winter's response in the Times straight afterwards, was that Roman Abramovich has shot Bambi, and he'd be the man who remembered us shooting Bambi. And everyone referred us to, everyone said, "Oh, Tuchel's, it's only because he's German and they want to appease the Germans." And you kind of looked at it and thought, that's utter nonsense. They've sacked a man who was over promoted beyond his station because of his affiliations with the club. Fine, that's the line. That's the road they went down. We've seen very big clubs doing that in the last 2 years. That seems to be a theme. And they've sacked him and brought in a tactician, and a very, very good tactician. And for all Frank Lampard's, even if you were the biggest fan of Frank Lampard ever, no one has ever referred to him like that. You could say he got the club, he brought the young players through, etc., etc. But no one ever went, "Oh my God, that guy, his football mind is astonishing."
Yeah.
Whereas it seemed to take Thomas Tuchel a week to work out where his strengths and weaknesses were in that Chelsea side.
Yes.
That first game,
he drew that first game, didn't he?
Yeah, he played 5 at the back, and Kevin went, "Oh, I'm not really sure about this." But he knew straight away where the strengths were, and the strength is in that central midfield pivot, which is very good. You use Azpilicueta's experience, and he looked at that team that Antonio Conte had to win the Premier League 3 years ago, and thought, "How can I recreate that?" And he recreated it close to being that team. As someone from the outside, he knew that was the last time Chelsea had been good, and he sort of recreated that pattern of play. And I'm not saying he's taken it entirely from Conte. He's obviously tweaked it as time's gone on, but he immediately knew that the power there was in the defence and how to be organised, and then to use that pace, because they've got so many attacking midfielders with pace, and obviously Timo Werner, very quick. Is much quicker than he looks, because he's got that sort of languid, tall sort of style.
Berbatov vibe.
Yeah, but quicker than Berbatov, and works so much harder than Berbatov. You're surprised to see he ran more kilometres than Kante last night, and that's really telling, because you wouldn't know that from looking at him, because he has that languid style and that lazy style, looks like that. But they use that pace really well. So when you like I said before, when they go quick. And Real Madrid looked old. They looked tired. They couldn't keep up with it. They couldn't keep up with that movement. And Chelsea didn't particularly want to. There's no interest in Chelsea in camping outside Real Madrid's box and popping it back and forth.
Yeah.
Because Sergio Ramos will drink that all day. But you've got to go with pace, and they went with pace. And I'm so glad when they scored that second goal, because you did fear for them that they were going to get hit by a late strike. But so many great plays, so many great performances. That's it. Rudiger played really, really well. Kante, obviously, as ever, fantastic. Mason Mount, we've become utterly used to it now. Yeah. With him and Phil Foden,
he's able to dominate games.
Yeah.
At this young an age. Both. I'm pleased you mentioned Phil Foden as well in the same sentence there, because actually I think we should talk about England's young stars coming forward. Now we've got 2 players there in Mount and Foden, who have, maybe dominates a bit of a strong word, but had a superb string of performances in the knockout games this year's Champions League, particularly in the semi-finals we've just seen. Is it too simplistic to say this is the best generation of creative midfielders that England have had ever?
Yes.
I mean that. Do you think it is that? I mean, I really don't think we've had this many technicians at one time in an England squad.
Yeah, I think
in modern history, let's say.
The fact that you can name 4 or 5 down the years that would fit that but they've never come along together. I guess that's what you're saying. Glazer was obviously Gazza's the one that's
in one squad, exactly.
But he was the one that was, then he's surrounded by players who, Darren Anderson or Nicky Barmby or someone like that who weren't anywhere near his level. And some people, they don't want to talk about Glazer and say, "Oh, we can't call him the next Glazer." You can't call him the next Glazer if you're talking about Ross Barkley, because the hype around someone like that was far greater than it should have been, and then it creates this ridiculous situation where you can never reach that. But I think it's different with Phil Foden and Mason Mount, who are both extraordinary players. And like you say, they're not just at their young age, they're not just playing a bit part in a great team. They are playing central, pivotal roles in those teams.
Yeah.
And they're not, they're not cameo roles. They're not playing lip service to a young player. They're both in that starting 11s of the two best teams, or two of the best teams in Europe right now. They're in the starting 11s of those teams. Now, now we need to work out whether Gareth Southgate dares play them both. I mean, that's the key, isn't it?
And Jack Grealish, let's not forget.
I think, unfortunately, and what I think Jack Grealish is going to end up missing out. I really do. I think.
Don't you dare say that on this show.
I know this.
Get out. I'm getting rid of you. All right, see you later. Gone. See, right. Sorry, that was Sarah Winterburn saying some stuff she really shouldn't be saying on this show. Apologise. You can come back in. Well, no, this is the thing. We've got a plethora of attacking talent, and it just makes me think. Well, that's it then. That's 4 central holding midfielders and 5 right backs that will start for Gareth. That's the upsetting thing. We've had a message come in from Siddhartha Gerat, who says, "Who gets your Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year? Can Mount beat Foden out? Can he beat Foden out to Young Player of the Year, given he is just more important to Chelsea compared to Foden with City?" It's not a bad question, actually. Foden or Mount for Young Player? I mean, I think it's got to be between those two, hasn't it? And who wins it for you, Sarah?
Who do I actually think will win it? I think Phil Foden will win it.
Who do you want to win it?
I do favour Foden slightly over Mount, and it's only by the slightest sliver. I think, and also I think just because Foden's younger as well. I think he seems more astonishing because he is a younger player. He's only just 20, and Mount is that little bit older. I think they're both. I'm not going to say they're both equally good. Like I said, I do slightly prefer Foden. I think he's capable of something extraordinary, whereas I think Mount is probably slightly below that level. But they're both brilliant. Now, Player of the Year, I've already said Ruben Diaz, I think would be my choice. I do go with that, the idea that Player of the Year probably should be a player who has propelled a team onto something better. Now, you could argue that about Bruno Fernandes, that they wouldn't be second without him, but at the end of the day, they could end the season with nothing. And so I do find that, and also Fernandes is as performances have dropped off, undoubtedly because he's tired. He has been played and played and played, and there's certain games, certainly in the early stages of the Europa League, where you just wondered what on earth Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was doing in starting him again and again and again. Massively over-reliant on him, and he does look tired now. So for me, he wouldn't be my Player of the Year. I think Ruben Diaz will be the one. Like I say, I think he might get the Football Writers Award. I think the PFA Award will go to Fernandes. Young player, I think the players will vote for Foden. I think the hype around him is probably slightly bigger than the hype around Mount. Yeah.
I think you're right on that. We've talked a lot there about City and Chelsea. Let's move on to the actual game this weekend then. So it's City at home to Chelsea. Dress rehearsal of the biggest game in Man City's history coming up in a couple of weeks, and one of the biggest in Chelsea's. What's going to happen in the league? Do Man City rest players here, given the league's pretty much settled?
I don't think they do, just because they want to win it on Saturday. I think they want to get it out of the way, and I think this is a perfect way to do it, isn't it? It's dual purpose. You win the league and you put a marker down. Yeah. So I can't imagine them resting players for that game. Though we never know with Guardiola. You could play Pep Guardiola bingo, and he might make 9 changes. You will never be massively surprised by him. Anyone who plays fantasy league, don't ever put City players in. Because, you never know what he's going to do. But I've got a feeling. I think he'll want to win it. He'll want to get it done, and because he's obviously got 2 cup finals coming up. He'll want to get that done, and he'll want to. Chelsea beat Man City in the FA Cup semi-final. Remember, that will have hurt. That will have smarted. As much as they wanted to talk about the quadruple not being possible, of course they thought it was possible, because it was possible, and Chelsea are the ones who stood in the way of that. And they won't want to go into the Champions League final having lost twice to Chelsea in the space of a few months. I think what I'm guessing we're going to see something quite cagey. Obviously, Chelsea are not going to go out to attack City. They'll be quite happy to let City have the ball and try and hit them with pace. But like I said, that City defence at the moment, it's not the City defence at the start of the season. They're not going to be exposed in the same way they were by Jamie Vardy in those few weeks. So
no, that's right.
I can't see a lot of goals in this one, but
4-4 then. Minimum of 4-4. I think it's going to be quite an odd one. I think Chelsea, I still fancy them to get top 4. I don't know. It is going to be cagey, isn't it? And do you know what? When Chelsea won last night, I absolutely thought, well, if any team's going to beat Man City in the final, it is going to be Chelsea, much more so than Madrid. I think Madrid play exactly the way Man City would want them to play. But the league game will be billed as a dress rehearsal, but really, I think it's just going to be its own self-contained thing that isn't that big a deal for Man City, given that they've already got the league sorted out. So I think they will rest players. But like you say, I mean, Ferran Torres coming in, for example, still high quality stuff. They've still got a wonderful squad, so it's not that big a deal. Let's move on to something that isn't actually necessarily on the pitch, football related, about the Glazer protests at Manchester United. Are we going to see more of these Glazer protests, Sarah? They're at home to Aston Villa this weekend. Or they're away. They're playing Aston Villa this weekend. Yeah. They're away at Aston Villa, yeah. Are we going to see more of these protests, or was that just something that happened with the Liverpool game because it would be shown globally?
I think we have to see more of these protests. I think there's certainly a will for it amongst certain sections of the Man United support, and absolutely. I mean, you could say all day that it went too far, but there's a point where you need to go a little bit too far, otherwise nothing happens.
Well, this is it. This is exactly right. They wrote letters when it first happened. Nothing happened. They then had protests. Nothing happened. They had the green and gold campaign. Nothing happened. They split off and formed a whole another football club. Nothing happened. More protests. Nothing happened. They break into Old Trafford. They get their attention. So I'm not saying you should absolutely go and do this sort of thing, but if you are going to ignore protests all the time, what can you possibly expect is going to happen? What do you expect is going to happen? You can't keep doing this to people. In all walks of life. I don't just mean football.
Of course, there has to be. There has to be a forward motion in everything for it to have any effect. And it had to be stepped up. I mean, nobody's saying, or certainly I'm not saying that what happened when you hurt a policeman or when you destroy property, that unacceptable. But if you have a protest, where in any walk of life, whether it's football or any other, you're not responsible for what happens with every single person on that protest. And just as the police want to tell us that it's not all of them, when one or two members of the police do something despicable, as they do, they want to point out that they're in a minority, and the protesters are very much within their rights to turn around and go, the same rules should apply. The same rules apply. There is a minority, and there will be people who turn up who like smashing things up and who want violence. That happens on every protest. Yep. But the feelings behind this, they're genuine. And they're not about, people like Graham Souness making this silly point about, well, this wouldn't happen if Man United were any good. These points were being made when Man United were winning league upon league. Yes, it feels bigger now because of where Man United are, but there's not, every complaint that they're making, bar the obviously the Super League stuff, which is this particular cast list, goes back years. These people have. I still actually struggle to believe that it's legal to buy a club using a club. The whole idea of the leverage buyout is mental as far as I'm concerned. So you don't actually pay for the club, you get the club to pay for itself. And I know it's legal, and I know other businesses do it. And there's lots of Americans shouting at the screen going, of course it's fine, it's legal. But it's not, it doesn't make it right, does it? And if you're a Man United fan and you're looking at a 16-year ownership of a club where the owners haven't put a penny in and taken a hell of a lot of money out. Yeah. We have this schism, don't we, between fans who think that the clubs shouldn't be used as businesses and businessmen who obviously think that the clubs should be used as businesses. And unfortunately, we've gone so far down this road now that, unfortunately,
how do you put the
unfortunately these protests will lead to naught again, because the Glazers have made it very clear they're not walking away. They, what they paid for the club, that's now sort of quadrupled or whatever in value. So we're looking at £4 billion. And, reports the other day, which have clearly come from the Glazers themselves, saying that they think they can turn it into a £10 billion business. So if you think that a few protests are going to change their mind, it's not going to happen. But if you don't bang on the windows, then no one will let you in. And, they've got to make that noise, and they've got to make a stand, because the only chance they've got of getting rid of the Glazers, well, apart from finding someone else who can pay that kind of money,
pressure, though, isn't it?
Is to make it a pain in the arse. That's the only thing you do, is make it a pain in the arse. That means sacrificing games. It's going to mean games are postponed. It might mean that you get points docked, and it might mean that it splits the fans. It certainly will split the fans if points start being docked. but if you believe in it, and there's a lot of Man United fans who believe in this, in the long term, their only chance of getting rid of the Glazers is that a billionaire comes along. And as we know, billionaires aren't generally nice, benevolent people. They don't get to be me and you would be millionaires if it happened to nice, benevolent people.
I don't agree with that.
Well, I would. You're
okay, fine.
But
so, okay, then with that in mind, then are we going to see more protests this weekend at the game of Aston Villa?
Well, that's a way, isn't it? So I think you might see a little bit, but I think those games at home, and I mean that the rearranged game against Liverpool really is set up, isn't it? For because there's even going to be no, there aren't fans in that one, are there? Next Tuesday, there's fans the week after again for the Fulham game. But it'll be very interesting to see if that Liverpool game ends up going ahead, because there's absolutely no doubt they will try and recreate the same thing. And from the club's point of view, I don't know what they do, because if you heavy-handedly police it or heavy-handedly, then you can look very much like the bad guys very quickly.
Absolutely.
And then you turn the whole global media against you, and it's a really difficult line they're going to have to tread, because those fans will want some sort of concessions now. Chelsea have moved to put fans on, to listen to fans, put them on the bot, etc., etc. Now that all might be lip service, we don't know, but clubs are going to have to do that. Otherwise, this sort of thing is going to happen more and more often.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's hard to not be on the side of the protesters as long as they stay within common decency, Sarah. Let's talk about the game itself, though. United versus Villa. The rescheduling of the Liverpool game means that United now have got 4 games in, I think it's 7 days. Is there any chance that they drop out of the top 4 as a result of this?
No,
surely
I don't
not.
think so.
They're settled now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. It would take a cock of monumental proportions to drop out now, and I don't think they're going to do that. I certainly don't think they're going to fly through the rest of the season. I wouldn't be massively surprised if they ended up finishing 3rd, to be honest. But it's hard, isn't it? No one wants to play that many games in such a short period of time. But that's what your squad is for. And if he goes out and he plays Bruno Fernandes in every single one of those games, then more fool you, man. Think that use that squad. There's enough quality in that squad. You use those 18, 19 players instead of trying to use 12 or 13. Solskjaer's managing like it's 1982.
Yeah, I mean, so the team news is out for the game tonight against Roma, a game in which they are 6-2 up. Bruno Fernandes is playing.
Oh man!
I mean, I do find
honestly,
that
you couldn't make it up. I assumed that wasn't going to happen tonight. I thought of all the ridiculous things that could happen, I assumed that one was off the table. You're about to go into the busiest time in not only in your season, but probably one of the busiest times that any club's had over the last few seasons, and you're playing your tired, most important player in a game you're already 4 goals up in.
Have him on the bench. If you're 2-0 down, bring him on. Don't start him. Come on, mate. He did the same thing against Real Sociedad, and I just think, I know that Bruno Fernandes wants to play every single minute, but you know who else wants to do that? Every footballer, pretty much. Harry Kane wants to do that. And you can't let players do it. You can't let them make the decision on their fitness.
Do you know whose job it is to say to someone, no, you're not playing?
Is it mine?
And yes, it's your job.
Right, well, don't play then.
Don't tell Bruno Fernandes. No, it's when Bruno Fernandes says, boss, I want to play. It's Solskjaer's job to go, well, you're not. You
can't play. You played too many minutes.
That's his job. And that adds to this idea that, this nice guy who's kind of, putting his arm around them and making them all feel nice. Well, it's not his job to make them all feel nice. They've got wives for that. Manage.
Is that what wives are for, is it, Sarah? Absolutely ridiculous. Stone Age stuff.
Don't tell mine.
Bigot presenter, Sarah Winterburn. Right, let's move on, because there's so much to talk about. We'll do another 10 minutes or so, because I want people to have time to, get a cup of tea or whatever before the game starts tonight. More mad news. Jose Mourinho is now inexplicably manager of Roma. What's happened there then?
Well, I initially thought it was inexplicable, and then you kind of look at it again and think,
oh, okay, you've got some logic behind it, have you?
Well, the one place where he hasn't burned his bridges is Italy. He's still thought of very highly for, and obviously.
So why go and ruin it then? Don't go and ruin that. It's the one place on earth you're allowed in.
because there's no way he can step away, is there? He's, a man with his ego cannot possibly finish on a bad note. He has to go somewhere else. And and if you're looking from the outside, if you're not following Premier League football in the same way, you say, well, he changed his Spurs team to one that was in, I think it's 14th place or whatever when Pochettino left. There might have been a massively false position, but they were in a mess. And then he leaves with them in 6th. And you kind of, from the outside, you go, that looks all right, doesn't he? He took them to a cup final. If you don't look into it, and if you don't take into account the fans, and if you don't take into account the fact that he's thrown all these players in the bus,
you can't cater for people that don't look into it. That's a very generous thing.
Oh, you can.
A very dangerous thing to be doing.
Like I say, Italy's the one place he hasn't messed up. He's one place where he's still revered, and they're not averse to. The sort of anti-football in Italy in the same way that we are over here. They're not quite as precious about it, and Roma are exactly his kind of club because they're just big enough, but they've got to have delusions of grandeur and delusions of where they should be, but actually they haven't been very good for quite a long time.
And it's a tough league at the moment.
Yeah, and very, very similar to Spurs. It's so similar that they're exactly equal in the UEFA rankings. I mean, that's how similar they are to Spurs. Very similar size club. Next season, likelihood is they've got no European football, or they've got the Europa Conference League, which is what they're bound for as we speak. But so it'll be. You can imagine him doing enough next year to look like a hero, because if you haven't got all you've got to do is zero in on those Serie A games, and you could well end the season in 4th or 5th, which would be a massive improvement. We get to watch him from afar now, don't we? Which is quite nice.
We get to see him celebrate a Europa Conference League victory as if it's the World Cup. That's what we get to see, I think, next year.
Well, he'll be very giddy about winning that, won't he? I mean,
of course he will.
To win it the first time it exists would be like
he will. He'll tell us it's the best achievement of his career as well. But my point with this is that he's going to Roma at a time when Roma have got some good, exciting young players coming through. That's not really Jose's deal. He doesn't really deal with those sorts of players. If anything, he stifles that and moves them on. But it's also at a time when Inter Milan look fantastic. If Conte stays, they could dominate for a couple of years. Juve are going to come back stronger, depending on what happens with Ronaldo, whether he stays or goes. They'll either have money or they'll have Ronaldo. So they'll be challenging again, I imagine. Teams like Atalanta looking fantastic. I don't see where Roma actually break into that top 4 or 5. They're 7th at the minute, but that 4 or 5 look pretty solid. And when you compare Roma to United, who, they're a good side, but they're not. United aren't a world-class side at the minute. Well, they absolutely tonked Roma last Thursday. They may do the same again tonight. I think it's a very tough job, this, for Jose, and I'm very surprised he didn't take an international job as a buffer to succeed there before coming back to a club game. International football, well, he only gets to see the players once every 3 months, so they won't hate him straight away.
I think international football will eventually massively suit him, because those little bits of time, like you say, he won't have the time to mess those relationships up in the same way. But he probably thinks he's not ready for that. It's seen a little bit as an older man's job, isn't it? Unless you're Gareth Southgate, who's like an old man in a younger man's body. But he probably thinks it's very unusual, isn't it, that a manager excels at international level and then goes into club football and excels again. So it sort of feels like the end of the road. So I think for him, he'll be very, very reluctant to take that on. And this there's no way he could have turned this down, is there? He's like, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because we all went, oh, he's finished at the top level. He's finished at the top level. And then it turns out
10 minutes later,
he's probably finished at the very top level, but that little bit below, where they've got these aspirations, in the same way that Spurs did. They got pulled in by this idea of this winner. And even if the evidence, or the recent evidence, says something otherwise, there's still this aura, isn't there? Oh, he's a winner. He's a winner. And he'll bring that. He'll bring that to Roma, and
I love Jose. I've said this loads of times. I love Jose. I love him being in our league. Whatever league you're a part of, it's just great to have him in it. As long as he's not at your club, he's brilliant to watch.
Yeah, just wait till he's saying that he can make Derby massive again.
I'll take it. I want to believe. Break my heart, Jose. Break my heart. Let's move on to Spurs, Jose's former employer. They are away at Leeds this weekend. Good old Leeds.
Go on, say it.
No, I'm not going to say it this time. It's going to be a fun game. It's going to be a good. It's going to be a good game, I reckon. Spurs a little bit at the moment in limbo, though, aren't they? What are they playing for at the moment? Are they playing for Ryan Mason to get the job permanently? Are they playing to? Are the players playing to get moves elsewhere? Where are we? Where are we with Spurs now?
I think they're probably playing to secure Europa League football. I don't think they want to end up in the Conference League, which means they're not finishing 7th, which has become the only interesting thing about the Premier League season yet to happen is who can finish 7th or who can avoid 7th. And they're playing for pride. They're playing for fun probably as well now, because after sort of 18 months of Jose Mourinho, where it's not necessarily a whole lot of fun.
Yeah,
Ryan Mason will have brought something back, and what you can see from that game against Sheffield United. Now you can say it's only Sheffield United, but what you saw in that game was a lot of the patterns that happened under Mauricio Pochettino. It looked like they were being managed by a man who was trying to ape what Pochettino's done, right down to the Dele Alli back in at number 10, making runs beyond Harry Kane. All look quite familiar. And so the players will love that. We all like things that are familiar, don't we? And they're back in their sort of comfort zone a little bit and playing as they did under Pochettino in a very similar style.
His own closed day at school. His own closed day at school. We've got a 23-year-old supply teacher's in. He seems quite cool. He likes Led Zeppelin. And I wanna be in that guy's class. And that's what's happening now. And I hope they're going to enjoy the rest of the season. And Gareth Bale scoring a hat-trick felt like, you couldn't really write that. It was
It's like he did it for all of us, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. Leeds, on the other hand, are they just looking now to sounds very, very basic, but just finish the season as well as possible, I suppose?
Yeah, as boring as it sounds, yeah. And I think right now it's all about momentum. So, it's really difficult if you end a season badly to then start the next season well. I think what as players, and also because we're going to get to the point where the fans are coming in next season, it helps if you've had a little good run at the end of the previous season. Everyone feels a bit like, oh yeah, we can kick on. Whereas that feeling that you've kind of, what we saw from Sheffield United last year is once they'd finished one season badly, then it's really difficult to go again. Yes. So, what they'll be looking for is 2 or 3 wins in the last few games. And and the season has petered out a little bit for them. It's kind of, we're not quite as excited. Well, you're probably exactly as excited as you were about them at the start of the season. But we've all seen it a bit now, don't we? I mean, it's kind of, this will be a good game, because what we saw from Mason's Tottenham last week ain't going to fly against Leeds, because this is he's up against a proper tactician now. So what does he do? He has to have a different plan. He has to play this one slightly. He has to think about this one. It wasn't just a case of give the ball to Bale and he'll score goals, or give the ball to this is going to have to be. This could be good. This could be a decent game. It's proper. I'll say it for you.
It's proper. Thank you. It is proper. Good old Leeds, sort of good old Spurs. Okay, let's talk about 2 more games before we sign off for the night. Thank you guys at home for watching, by the way. Still time to get a few comments in on what we're talking about. Let's talk. Let's go. Where should we go? West Ham Everton or Arsenal West Brom? What do you reckon?
Oh, West Ham Everton.
West Ham Everton it is. I haven't got a banner for that one. Okay. Well, we've got this still. This is me doing it on the job. This is actually unbelievable stuff from me. West Ham versus Everton.
You're my man of the match, Mark.
Thank you. I thought West Ham were going to. I thought they were going to do it. I thought they were going to do top 4. Is that gone? Is that finished? Is it dead? They've still got a good run in. Starting with this one,
they've still got a good run in. This one's big. This. Everton have been poor, but Everton have been mostly poor at home. Everton are far better away from home. This one's interesting because I think West Ham at home and Everton away from home are actually really evenly matched. I do think, I never thought West Ham were going to reach the Champions League. You had this childish belief in this idea. But it was just sweet. It's sweet. You're cute and naive and tall.
They're still going to do it. They're still going to do it.
Just keep it going.
Yeah,
but this is interesting. The David Moyes factor. Everton, I hate the phrase "flat to deceive," but they're exactly that, aren't they? You kind of get sort of a little bit excited about them, and then it turns out they've got no backbone at all. Really struggled with that Abdoulaye Doucouré, who's been really under the radar signing this season, but really does signing. The energy in that midfield and the kind of intelligence he brings to that role. And the partnership he forged with Alan early doors, that was the everyone talked about James and Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
It was the new engine room.
that can only happen because of the stability in the middle.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for Everton, they've had a period without Allen, and now they've got a period without Doucouré, and they don't have that. You're immediately down to Tom Davies, or you're trying to shoehorn Gylfi Sigurdsson into that role. It'd be nice to see next season if everybody can stay fit, what they can do. But it's been a real season of could have been, should have been with
it's just
Everton,
the home form though. The home form has been so poor.
Really, they should have been in West Ham's position. On paper they're a better side than West Ham. On paper they've got a better manager.
Yeah.
On paper they've got a better goal scorer. There he is, not scoring a goal. So you're disappointed with what Everton have managed this season, because they should be in West Ham's position. It's there for the taking, and I just think they've just come up short, and it's a real shame. You get Carlo Ancelotti and you get those kind of players in, the front 3 or 4, if they're all fit, that they could all probably play at a higher level. And I just find it a bit. They disappoint me. They disappoint me.
I think if Everton have a transfer window as good as the last one they had last summer, I think next season they could do something if they, like you say, they sort out their home form, certainly. But if they can get in a couple of signings, 2 or 3 guys, maybe some cover for Richarlison, certainly some cover so Iwobi doesn't play as much, and maybe as good as Godfrey's been, maybe someone else at the back as well. I feel like they could do something pretty special. Goalkeeper as well, but let's keep that one quiet. West Ham on the other side. I'm still going to go Irons. Go on, Irons. You can do it. I still fancy them. They just missed terribly, Declan Rice, and I just also feel like they missed a real opportunity in January by not signing someone to replace Allaire, because it's ended up with just Antonio, who we know gets injured, and then after that, we're playing Lingard in the false 9. Come on, he's a great player, but play him in his proper position. Who knows? Anyway, look, one more game. We've got 13 minutes till kickoff in the Europa League. Europa League? I'm getting so confused. It's Super League.
It is Europa League.
Yeah, it is Europa League. Yeah, of course it is. Last game then, we'll do Arsenal West Brom. Let's talk about this game. I more want to talk about momentum. You mentioned it earlier, but this is a big one for Sam Allardyce, because if he finishes the season well, you can justify him staying on next season. He'll have a strong squad in the Championship. You'll expect him to come straight back up. And on the flip side, Arteta, it's been such a disappointing season from them. We keep getting told to trust the process. But this game tonight, straight after us against Villarreal, this is now season defining, isn't it? So what happens for both these managers and both these teams from tonight onwards, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we've not seen yet what they're going to do against Villarreal, because that really will define the season. And I can see them. This campaign's the Europa League campaign's been quite bizarre for Arsenal, because they've been on the edge of being put out 2 or 3 times, and they always seem to Arsenal it out of the bag. So I do fancy they might do it again. And actually, I think if they played Man United in the final, I'd actually quite fancy.
Why not?
In that game, I think in a one-off game, we've seen Arteta manage in the FA Cup final and did it in a one-off game last time, and I can see them doing that. Arsenal's a funny one. I want Mikel Arteta to work for some reason. I don't know. It might be the hair, but
got nice clothes. It's
not quite, is it? And because he started so well, and everything we saw from Arsenal last season, towards the end of last season, you thought this is going to be special. This guy, this guy's got something. This team looks so much better, but they've reverted to this mean, and the mean has been so bad, hasn't it? The mean has been hella mean. It's like awful. So yeah, it is. But again, it is about momentum. Now they're not going to finish the league season in the European places, but if you put in 3 or 4 wins at the end of the season, again, it's about that lift, isn't it? And then you start thinking, oh yeah, we ended last season quite well, so if we just keep that going. And West Brom massively, I think they are absolutely nailed on, I think, to be at the top end of the Championship next season. I can't imagine they aren't. You look at that squad, even if you assume you're going to lose a couple of them, obviously loan players will go back, and you presume you're going to lose Pereira. But
the parachute money means that they can do stuff as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of excellent Championship players in that squad. And quite crucially, they've not got loads of players who will be poached. Almost like Norwich, who came down, who were they could afford to lose 2 players. They didn't have to sell a load more, and then they just come back up again.
But also, there's the odd benefit of it being a COVID market, and players and teams, aren't willing to splash a lot of money out, particularly on players that have just been relegated. So in the same way that Norwich were buffered a little bit by that last time, West Brom could find the same thing this time. All the relegated teams could this time. But, West Brom have got the ones you might want to poach, whereas Sheffield United, for example, haven't really, with the exception of maybe Berge. I think he's the only one who you're probably looking at, and he's kind of been because he's not playing most of the season. He's actually probably immune to that relegation sort of the sort of feel, the vibe around the rest of that squad is very negative. He's
Fulham
by it,
a few Fulham players will stay in the Premier League, I think, but West Brom. I mean, you're talking about Allardyce. Really interesting with Allardyce, whether he wants to stay. I think he'll have the option. I think they've ended the season well enough. And I think if you're going to start in the Championship with that squad, you probably want to start with Allardyce because, chances are he will probably take you up.
100%,
so I think it's for him, whether it is his time of life, at his stage of his career, does he want to have what is a grind of a season in the Championship? It's not massive amount of fun. So does he stay and do that? I think it'll be down to him, really. I think West Brom will probably want to keep him because I think it's probably more or less a guaranteed promotion back to the Premier League. But
yeah, I think you're right. Sarah, we've done 51 minutes.
Wow.
We've got 9 minutes until the football starts. So let's give people a chance to get out there, get a cup of tea, whatever they want to do before the games start. Sarah, it's been great having you here again this week. We'll do the same thing again next Thursday, 7:00 here on a Football 365 show. If you guys at home enjoyed it, it'll be on YouTube and stuff afterwards. So if you missed any of it or you want to, for whatever reason, watch it again, I don't know why you do that, but feel free to do that. Watch it again. We'll post on it on Twitter as well, so feel free to retweet or whatever. That would really be helpful. That's it from us. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can comment beneath or you can email us. It's the editor@football365.com. Until next week, goodbye from me and goodbye from Sarah Winterburn.
Ta-ra.
Ta-ra, that's fine as well. Right, cheers.